Welcome along to another episode of our Consultations Masterclass. I am Lou and I am joined by Dario Cotroneo right over here. So today, this is week 5, class 5, and that means that we are officially over the halfway mark of our 8-week series, a conversation with Dario Cotroneo and myself on all things hair, inspiration, motivation, tips and tricks. And you know what? The time has absolutely flown by. So we're going to get straight into it today. Now, today's class is all about the 7 steps, and I'll let Dario dive straight into that. And I just wanted to say before I pull up our presentation that we have, please do ask any questions you have, and I will keep an eye on those and feed them through to Dario as we go. So let's get started.
Awesome. Can't wait. Can't wait. Okay, so welcome everybody. Welcome to our 7 steps. We'll go and dive into the first slide. Okay, so for me, the most important thing in terms of consultation is about connection. So it's important to remember that 65% of all of our communication are absorbed visually. So 38% is tone, 7% words, 65% is our body language. I think one of the biggest things that I've learned in my career is to understand that the content of our verbal communication is what we're actually saying to our clients will only work for us if our professional look and body gestures are working together. So we have to look professional and smile to match. I really think when we think about being, the hairdresser, I always think, one of the tips that I give hairdressers is that when you get dressed in the morning, dress for the type of clientele you want to attract. It's really important. So we'll go to the next slide. Okay, so our next slide's really about creating rapport. Rapport is probably the most important aspect. I mean, these are really critical steps, and that's why we've narrowed them down to 7. So the yes frame is the introduction of a meeting with your client, where you'll ask them some simple questions in which that you're assured that they'll reply yes to what you're saying. So if you're a receptionist or front of house, when a guest rocks up and says, "Are you here to see Brian?" The word is yes. I'll give you all a very big tip. If the guest is new, Google them before they come in and get a picture of what they look like. It's really important. I mean, we've gone to a completely another level. We get our guests to send us photos before they come in of what they look like. But if you're not doing that, just simply try and Google your client, get an image of what they look like. So the whole team knows when they see this person that they can walk up to that person and say, "Mary, welcome to our salon." You will develop so much rapport straight away from your guests. And that goes a long way to building trust. So you might ask, the second question is, I understand you're here for a cut and color. Is that correct? So this will be the second yes in that process. This is called an agreement framework. And this will get them used to saying the word yes and put them into a positive state of mind. It's very important. This will assist them in surrendering and letting go. So if you can start to build that rapport and that connection early on, the barriers start to come down. And I really believe this is the foundation for a long-lasting and enjoyable relationship. So we'll go to the next slide. So modality. As you can see, I'm putting a lot of emphasis in my modality right on this chapter. So here's how you discover your modality. 40% of the population use words like see, clear, clarity, vision, image, picture. They usually speak really fast, so quite clearly I'm visual, as a picture says 1,000 words, and they usually look up to access information. This is very important, by the way, because if you can read people, you'll be able to pivot and be agile to communicating to that person's individual needs and how they like to communicate. Kinesthetic clients use words like feel, felt, touch, heat, feeling, gut instinct, soft, smooth. They usually speak more slowly as they like to digest their words. They usually look down to access information. So this is very important because early on in my career, I used to read this really incorrect and thinking the guest was not paying attention to me, but simply I didn't understand his or her modalities. We'll go to the next slide. So here's how you understand auditory clients. Auditory clients usually use words like hear, sound, speak, talk, chat. They usually turn their head to the side when they're listening to you speak. They might not look at you. They might not need to look at you. So they literally turn to the side and when they want to access information, because the ear is their eye. And that's the most important first source of access to information versus a visual person, which is through sight. So if you see someone turning their head when you're talking, don't be disarmed by this. They're usually people that work in a very corporate world, or they work with KPIs, and they work with, sorry, not KPIs, it's our analytical client, but they usually work with people that are quite structured. They work for government, and they take information auditory, so they're very structured. So when I see this, I get really inspired to use words that are going to uplift the experience. So hence why, as a hairdresser, your vocabulary really needs to be quite broad, so that you can start to story tell with a lot more depth, and to really intrigue your client in the journey that you want to take them on, particularly if they're auditory. And then we have analytical clients. Language built on the business world. This is really around like accountants, people that are really structured when it comes to bean counting. And so, you know, when you're dealing with someone that's analytical, they'll usually try to repeat back to you and put in order what they understand, because they love being in control. So don't think that your client's trying to dominate you in this space. It's just simply they are being themselves. And I think what we've got to learn in hairdressing is we've truly got to learn to coexist with people. We've got to understand them. How do they like to communicate? And then we can match and mirror what they're communicating, as long as it's positive. But please note, this will take some practice. You have to have lots of fun with it, and wait until it comes naturally to you. But this is a great guide to make you more self-aware. Okay, we'll go to the next slide. So number 4, match and mirror your client. So tonality, ups and downs in the voice. So if my guest walks in and says, "Good morning, Dario," I'd say, "Good morning, Mary." She'd be like, "Why are you so chirpy?" And say, "Mary, I'm just following your inspired tone." I'm very cheeky with my guests, because I like to have fun in the salon, but tonality is very important. If your client's high and you're low, your guests will suspect that you're not that confident, and then they'll dominate. And that's truly only because we've not stepped up to the plate. Modality such as visual, kinesthetic, auditory, and analytical, you've got to use this language as I've just walked you through. This is a key component to match and mirroring your client's modality. And then you have body language. So don't match and mirror clients that are angry or appear sad, their body language. Don't match and mirror too obvious or too accurate, because it looks like that we're a little bit inexperienced. We've really got to just pick up the cues and then identify who that client is, how she likes to communicate, and then we can really connect with our salon guests. We'll go to the next one. And ultimately, if you have a shy or a nice client, I usually, this is really important, because not everyone's going to be an extrovert. If you've got an introvert client, I usually sit down in front of them eye to eye, and I make sure that we're on the same level. I don't want to dominate that guest. I want to make that guest feel that she's safe. I don't talk via a mirror when I do consults. I talk eye to eye until I've developed a high level of rapport. Once I've got a high level of rapport, I'll then dialogue via the mirror. If you've got a controlling client, rude or abrupt, she's probably nervous. Please give people the benefit of the doubt. This resistance that you're getting from your client really exposes the lack of rapport that you've built with that person. So that's very normal, by the way, to have someone that's rejecting or dismissing, because we haven't earned the right to really get into that person's headspace. So a tip to handle this is to stand in front of the client with self-belief and certainty. And while you match and mirror your client, ensure that your voice is calm, and most importantly, that it's assertive. See, we have to be in control of our engine, which is our voice, and that drives our message. It's really important. And I think sometimes you may say something, but it's how it's said that's the most powerful impact in terms of communication. So your certainty must exceed their doubt about the process. Be sure to clarify everything with this person to ensure that it's agreed that you're on the same page. It also gives room to incorporate the yes frame in putting them into more of an accepting place. So recapping. So we'll go to the next slide. Thank you. Okay, so number 5, so always use command tonality. This is a must, because remember that you are the professional and they are the client. They've come to you for your advice, so you have to listen and give 100% of yourself to your client needs and wants. To be 100% listened to is so rare in this world, and it will build rapport really quickly. And I learned this later on in my career, that listening is absolutely what it's all about. You have to empty yourself before you talk to your client. And so I have a practice before I come to work. I go to a cafe and I really make room for my clients that day in my mind and in my headspace. So I've got more space to take on board what's about to come my way. And so when I see my guests, that I've got room to take on board what they're saying to me, and then I can, I feel quite restored and replenished because I've made room mentally as far as making sure that I'm in a very good headspace before I deal with 8 souls for that day, 8 hearts. Because I really believe that when you've got guests coming in, it's all about touching hearts and connecting with people. And using command tonality will absolutely make sure that they remember this service is 100% about them. Okay, because you're really making sure you're investing yourself into them. So if you make it about your client, they'll never forget it and will recommend you, because it's very rare in this world for people to actually, I believe the luxury is time that we're giving people in the salon. So we'll go to the next slide. Okay, so focus on quality, communication, and effectiveness and rapport. So these are the 4 things that I really like to highlight. Quality, so fewer words but with more meaning. Communication, effectiveness, so really choose your words carefully for that client's modality and the way you position yourself and the way you communicate. If your client's highly visual, it's okay to use visuals as in pictures and connect with them with pictures, but I wouldn't be engaging an auditory or an analytical client with pictures, because they simply will be looking at you like lost in space. They won't really connect with what you're saying. And we sometimes will assume that there's something wrong with that guest, but ultimately we've got to look in the mirror. It's really about ourselves. We need to step up and create more awareness on who we're actually connecting with that day in the salon. So right at the end, we've got to clarify what you've taken in from your guest, your client. I like to call them guests, by the way. You'll hear that me say that a lot, because I believe that this is your home. They've come into your home. And if you talk to them as a guest, they'll behave like a guest. But if you talk to them as a client, they'll behave like a client. The choice is yours. So you can build even high levels of rapport and ensure that you feel understood. This always gives you an opportunity for yes frames. So I'll give you an example. So what I'm hearing is that you want balayage today, say for instance, is that correct? This is what I say at the end of each chapter of my conversation with my guest. So I could say, so what I'm hearing is that you'd like a lob today, is that correct? What I'm hearing is that you want a bob, is that correct? And the more you can get your guests to say yes early on in your connection phase, wow, your guest will listen to you because you're clearly listening to her. So we'll go to the next slide. Okay, so decoding body language. This is, again, one of my favorites. I mean, they're all my favorites because I put this presentation together, but I've got to remind myself that. So your body language generates your emotional and physical response to all you encounter in life. I think a lot of people just focus on what's coming out of their mouth, but really forget how it's being communicated. And the body doesn't lie. I believe the body tells the truth more than the words. So the more fluent you are in comprehending and gently responding to your body language, the more you'll know yourself and embody a sense of humble self-confidence and health and well-being. Because ultimately we are selling happiness in our salons. And all those things that I've just walked you through, for me, are really aligned to my values. I really understand that health and well-being is everything, not only for the guest's hair, but our relationship, to ensure that it's going to sustain and be sustainable for years to come. So when you act with this intention, you'll always see this come back to you in your life. And this is about being really pure, really truthful to yourself, not trying to fake it till you make it, really own it. And for me, that's really what's changed my career many years ago, is I found my inner voice and I became my authentic self. I had to trust myself. So we'll go to the next slide. So you'll develop a verbal model of the world that complements and clarifies the language of emotions spoken by your body. So what you say matches what you do. And I think this is ultimately how we earn the right. 63% of communication is nonverbal, including tone, voice, eye movement, posture, hand gestures, facial expression, and more. The body language can especially be felt in emotional situations, particularly when a guest is not happy, whether it be with her hair or something she's going through in life. Body language usually prevails over words. So that's why we have to be at one, have a sense of flow with what we're talking about, with our physiology, as well as with our tonality and words. So we'll go to the next slide.
I was just going to ask a question on this one as well. So when you have done the decoding of body language, and let's say, you've been able to sort of pick up certain things based on maybe they're coming that, arms crossed or head sort of tucked. What then do you do from there once you sort of have...
Good question. I love this. I love these lives. They're really good. So some tips for you. I really like to talk to my guests with their legs uncrossed, because I want to, I like my guests to sit up. I want them to be a little bit uncomfortable. If you're finding where your client's guest's feet are pointing is where her attention's at. This is very important. If her feet are not pointed in your direction, then you have to change your modality. You have to change the way that you're coming across assertive. So you have to have a lot of self-awareness, and that's why you have to be very conscious of yourself and how you're coming across, and really reading your guest being receptive to what you're communicating. But I do like making guests uncomfortable. I do lots of tips and tricks in terms of doing little subtle things to make her uncomfortable. Just like I was doing a class yesterday, I flipped this girl's hair to the side opposite to the way she was parting it. When I was talking to her, I was demonstrating that I would only talk to someone if they're uncomfortable, because I will have her attention. If I'm talking to someone and they're comfortable, I will not have her attention. She's practicing her script that she's got ready to talk to you about what she wants, but you need to be focused on what she needs. And I think that's the difference in hairdressing. It's not giving people what they want, it's giving them what they need. So to answer your question, there are lots of, there's too many tips and tricks for this one session, and you're setting me up, Lou, to go over time. But that was a great question. But my tip for you is just watch where the feet are pointing, and that'll give you, if they're not pointing your way, you've got to change your language. And also you have to stand or sit directly. You've got to move your stool to in front of those feet, because chances are she's probably looking behind you at someone that she's more attracted to into what they're doing versus what she's seeing and hearing. So we can change that, by the way, and grab people's attention, but we have to learn how to pivot.
Yeah, awesome.
Thank you.
Nice.
So next slide. So gestures. Okay, so hand signals can communicate without using any speech. So touching communicates. Touching can be friendly or it can be aggressive. There's some golden rules in hairdressing in terms of touching people on the shoulder or the elbow. I wouldn't be touching a woman anywhere between here, because if you go to touch someone somewhere on someone, and it's a sensitive area for that person, they become so self-conscious that they stop listening. And I really try to talk to my guests with open palms. I really consciously about open my palms up, that they are safe in my care. It's really important. That's probably the most important out of this whole section, because if you close in your communication, then the guest, you're not trusting yourself, and therefore the guest is more alarmed about, do I trust this person or not? And most people will go to more conservative options, and therefore they'll usually say something like, I'll have what I had last time, or I'll have a trim. So the way a person stands reflects their level of confidence and comfort levels. If a person stands tall to speak, they are seen as more confident. If a person's standing with their hands on their hips, this can indicate aggression or alertness. So it really depends on how I want my guests to feel. I'm very, very confident when we talk about hairdressing, because I've been doing it 31 years. If you were to ask me about cars, well, no, I don't drive. And so I will not be ever talking about cars. But my client will know from my body language just how proud I am of hair. So my tip for you in terms of the way to really get your engine out is you have to actually push your chest forward and shoulders back when you talk. You have to expose the top part of your chest in terms of what I call chest light. So if there was a light above you, the light has to bounce off your chest. If it's not, that means that your shoulders are forward and you generally are projecting a lack of self-confidence in what you're saying. We often blame clients, but clients aren't silly. They know how to read. It's primitive when we read people, when we see people, when we hear people. We've all got this built into us from when we were children. And I just think we've got to be more self-aware on how we demonstrate our confidence, not only through our mind, but also through our physiology. So if we can go to the next slide. Okay, so gestures. So I've got some great points here. So if your guest is, sitting with the legs crossed and foot kicking, well, she's bored. And so if you're a receptionist or front of house, or if you've got a guest waiting for a color to be processed, it's probably time that we checked in with that guest before it percolated a little bit too long. If your guest is sitting with her legs apart, slightly open, not too far, then that means she's open and relaxed. And I really try to get my guest's legs uncrossed because I don't want her uptight. I don't want her comfortable. I want her to be relaxed and feel comfortable in and around you. If her legs are, if her arms are crossed on the top of her chest, then obviously she's clearly quite defensive with what we're saying. So we'll go to the next slide.
I was just going to say on, oh no, I've just lost it. I had a question that I was holding on to there.
Oh, sorry.
No, I'm sure it'll come back to me. But that is the 7 steps.
Amazing.
So good, so good. And we've had a few comments in the thread here as well from people sharing that, they really, really do feel that open palm gesture works and that they love using that. And another one from Jess just commenting on how human beings are so complex and it can be so tough to really decipher what is going on and what they are truly feeling and underneath everything. So making a hairdresser's job or a salon owner's job just that little bit more difficult and a little bit more complex. So this is awesome to get some behind the scenes on what you've experienced and what you've sort of broken this down into.
Thank you. If I can just say, it's once you study it and understand it, it's so simple because it becomes part of your consciousness and awareness, and then becomes part of your habituation, your habits. It's very important. From one of the tips that I was given years ago, success isn't a skill, it's a habit. And if you focus on, you can be overwhelmed listening to all this information, but if you process it and study it, and make it part of your life, you'll actually change your life. I've become a far better communicator because I had to understand me, and before I understood, my guests, I had to understand how I looked. I mean, I'll give you an example. If you really want to be an effective communicator, do a presentation, have someone record it, do this as a team. This is really powerful. Present to yourself as a team. And I'll guarantee you, most hairdressers don't want to be recorded because they don't like the sound of their voice. They don't like how they look. Well, you have to actually get used to that because that's what the world sees. And one, a great tool in training is record one another. Get yourself used to actually understand what I look like, what I sound like, then get comfortable with that. And then you'll be at one with what you're presenting because you won't be so self-conscious while you're communicating. You'll actually be all about the guest because you actually trust how you sound. And ultimately, to finish this off, I really believe a lot of people don't actually open their mouth up wide enough when they communicate. And I learned this from my voice coach years ago. I did a lot of work on TV. I had a voice coach from NIDA, which is here in Sydney. It's an acting school, and it really helped me embrace my voice, my vocal cords, and helped me warm up my voice before I did a presentation. And it's very much like an engine. You have to really understand, but you got to open that mouth wide enough to get the words out. And if your chest is not up high enough, your words hit the floor. So you actually have to be talking over your client and to hit your client. But a lot of us are actually looking at the floor when we're talking, and it just doesn't. And that's why guests, if they can't understand it, they'll always be conservative. But it's brilliant when you understand this, because every day is like a new beginning. You've got beautiful new guests coming in, new experiences coming in. And as long as you're good, they'll be good. And that's what I love about communication. It's all about you first. You have to put you first. A lot of mindfulness techniques really help you get to that really centered place that you can understand. It's just a question. And if your guest is saying something to you that potentially is quite negative, it actually is not negative if you're in a really good headspace. You'll see it as constructive feedback. But if you're in a negative if you're in a quite a negative headspace, you'll see it as an attack. And how you react within your body will absolutely come across as a confrontation. And I hear a lot of hairdressers talk about they don't like confrontation. And I think that's the problem. It's actually just communication. It's not a confrontation. I think just by saying confrontation is quite alarmist. So hopefully everyone's been inspired by what we've spoken about. And I've certainly really enjoyed this session.
Oh, thank you so much, Dario. And for anyone else that would like to see more about taking on feedback, check out class 3 that we have done, which is on our channel under Consultation Masterclass, all about the ego. So that's definitely one to jump back and hear some of Dario's tips on that, because that was awesome. I was going to just finish off with a question on these steps as well. And so I guess, once you've sort of started to really read people and starting to take on these certain different cues that you're getting, understanding what sort of modality to use, reading gestures, is that all to really prepare you with, where the client's at? And so do you then alter, I guess, what you are going to give to that client from there? You alter the service that you're giving?
Yes, yeah, absolutely. And that leads us into what we're doing next week.
Awesome. Yes, please tell us about it.
Well, that's what leads into next week, because ultimately what we've spoken about in this session is about really connecting with your guests. In hairdressing for me is about emotion of the day. So every single person you've got coming in has a different level of emotion. And we've got to really be able to pivot and adapt. And that's why it's like a movie. It's such a beautiful movie, hairdressing, is because you get to tap into people's lives and you get to, help people rest and restore in your salon. It's really critical. People often don't have this in their life where they can stop and pause. So really what we've walked you through in this session was to really all those 7 steps will help you for what we're doing in our next session, which is next week, which is all about the consultation experience. So that's actually the meat in all of these 8 episodes that we've got and presenting for you with Timely. It is critical that you watch next week's session because it will really make sense of everything that we've put together for you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Dario. I'm just going to bring us back to full screen there. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. That was fabulous. And as Dario mentioned, next week we will be back, which will be about the consultation experience. So that will be week 7, class 7. Now, we will also be back next Sunday. So not this Sunday coming, but the one after, which is the 15th of November. We will be going live for another class. So make sure you stop by. There will be events set up on Facebook for that one. But thanks everyone. If there's any other questions that you have, please drop them in and I'll keep an eye on those. Have a lovely evening or a lovely day to our UK friends.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks. Bye.